Hey, welcome to another Intro to Java programming video. This video is going to be one that you need to pay really close attention to because it's going to be one of the major puzzle pieces for putting together the puzzle of your translator project. We're going to be working with images here. We're going to work with an array of images, and we're going to put those images on image icons, and then put those image icons onto JLabels, which will then be put onto JPanels, which will then be added to a frame. It seems like there's a lot of things kind of wrapped up, and there's a little kind of a high level of complexity going on in this project. So tune in, take really good notes, and make sure you take away from this the pieces of the puzzle that you need to put together your project. All right, let's dig into it. I'm going to run this so you can see how it works. And here you have it. You've got the an image of a bunny up here. You can see that the frame is rather large. I did this so that it would accommodate some of the larger images. You'll see that this one is shorter, this one is a little taller, that one's a little taller. And what I'm doing is I'm pressing this randomize button, and it's going to flip back and forth between the various images. It'll randomly choose one from the list of images. Okay? Let's take a look at the code. All right, so we're working with images here, so we need to pay attention to the file structure overall. This is our project folder, week 6. Okay, you should have that. It's got the out, it's got the source, in the out it's got the production, and the week 6, and it's got all its classes. It's got the idea folder with all of our XML files. And then we've got an images folder, which is going to store all of our images. All right? So usually when we put images into a file, we have made a folder inside of our project folder that's going to store those images. Then we reference it through a path in the ImageIO section of our code. So that's just a little bit about the structure of the project folder. Let's get into the actual code. So the class is called ImageArrays. It extends JFrame and it implements Action Listener. It implements Action Listener because it's got that button. When you press it, it fires off an action event, and we make things happen in action performed. We can ignore this JPanel. I didn't actually use it. I have a JPanel here called GUI panel. I've got a button called randomize. I got an array of images called pics, and I've got an array of strings called names. And these names, you will see, correlate with all of the names of the images. You can see bun.jpg, and you can find that right there. There's cat.jpg, you can find that right there, and then so on and so forth. All of these names here correlate with the names of the files over here. We saw something like this before. When we wanted to do images before, in the try and catch, we make a string for a path that has the file name exactly as you see it in your images folder, and then you have a path leading to it, right? Well, these strings are going to be used to append to or concatenate to a path that's going to be used with the ImageIO, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit. But just so you know, this is prepping you for that. This is our array of strings that are correlating with the file names of the images, and they have to be exactly the same. They have to be spelled exactly the same with the same case, and they have to have the exact same file extensions as these over there. If they don't, they're not going to find it. It's going to be the same as you would have done with creating a path to an image in any other ImageIO that we've done in the past. Okay, I've got a constant here, an int constant called numpics, which is going to be names.length. So it's going to look at the length of the names array, okay, and it's going to set that constant to be the same name. Now what I'm doing here is very similar to what you saw in a previous video, how things up at the top are going to have effects as we go down. Kind of like in the buttons project, we saw the run button arrays where the number of names that were in these two arrays changed the number of buttons that actually got added. Well, we're going to have that same sort of cascading effect in this image arrays one as well. You can see that we've got a bunch of names here, and this constant is going to be set based on the length of those names. Okay? I've got an image J panel called image panel. I've got an image called current image. I've got an image icon called icon, and a J label called image label. These things here are going to be used in conjunction. So what an image icon is it's just like it's a J component that it's kind of like it's like a holder for an image. Okay, and it can be placed on all sorts of different types of J components. It can be put on J labels, it can be put on buttons, it can be put on all kinds of things. Okay, I'm using an image icon here because it's very easy to put them on a label, and then you can move that label wherever you want within a GUI. You don't have to worry about drawing something to a graphics context. I believe that it's a little bit more flexible in terms of how you want to have an image show up in your composition. So the image icon is going to hold the image, and that's going to be called current image. So we're going to eventually add the current image to the image icon. And then that image icon is going to be set on the image label. So labels can have icons. Then we're going to take that image label and add it to a J panel. Okay, so those things right there all be used in conjunction. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. Let's look at the main. We're doing all the same stuff that we always do in the main. We instantiate our frame, we set the default close operation, set layout. I made it a border layout because we're going to put the button down in the bottom. We're going to put the image label and icon and image up there in the center. We set the preferred size, and I set the height to 960 and the width to 869, so it'll accommodate the max sizes of all of these images over here. Okay? If you're going to do something like this, it might be a good idea to choose images that are all roughly the same size. It'll just work better. I've got a method called setUpGUI, which is going to, set up the GUI. And then I've got pack and set visible true. So let's take a look at setUpGUI really quickly. In setUpGUI, what we're going to do is we're going to set the layout to the border layout, which actually I already did, so I don't know why I've got that done twice. I can actually just delete this. It will still work. It's a border layout. I already set it before. So yeah, you can see it still works. I'm not sure why I did it twice, but I did. I'm creating a J panel here, my GUI panel that's got a flow layout. And before I do anything with that layout, I want to load my images. So I've got a method here called load all images, because in this case I've got this long list of images. I don't have just one image, and I could just do 10 different try catch statements for all the image IO stuff and do that manually, but it's a lot easier to make an array of images and do that through a loop. So anytime you have a certain process that you want to have happen over and over and over and over and over again, it helps to do it in a loop. And if you have a lot of things that you want to work on as a group in a loop, and they're all the same type of thing, you do it with an array. We saw that with the J buttons and J radio buttons. We're going to see the same thing with images. So let's take a look at load all images. The image loading is essentially a two-level algorithm here. Now what I mean by that is I've got a method here called load all images, and it's going to have a loop that's going to call on a method that I created called load image. And the load image method is very similar to what we saw before, in that it's going to do the try and catch, it's going to have a path, and it's going to use that path to make a file and use that file to load the image into that image array. So first things first, in load all images, I have to make my array of images. So pics gets new image array, and it's num pics in length. And remember, num pics is based off the total number of strings that I have in this string array. So these strings are going to correlate with the images. We saw this in the strings and the buttons and the strings and the radio buttons in that previous video. So a similar type of thing is happening here. We're going to use those things in parallel. So I'm making that array to be the same length as the string names. And now I'm going to do a loop over the names, and I'm going to use those names in my load image method. Okay, so for int I is 0, I less than num pics, I plus plus. And in there, all I'm going to do is call on my load image method. So let's take a look at that. You can see that it takes in a string and it takes in an int. And what this string is going to be a name from that names array. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use each of those names from that names array to concatenate it to a path. All right, let's take a look at how that works. So load image. Let's just say we're doing it on the first iteration. I is 0. So it's going to take names at 0, which would be bun. We already saw that. And then it's going to take the number 0. So bun is going to get stored in name, and 0 is going to be here on index. So what we're going to do here is bun gets concatenated, bun.jpg gets concatenated to my path here. And we're going to use that path to create a file, and then we're going to try and catch. We're going to try to read in this file. If it can find it, great. It's going to store it into the index of my pics array. Since 0 came in here, it's going to store it into the 0 index of the pics array. It'll store it into the first one. All right, so we'll just assume that that all worked. We don't have to go to the catch. This method terminates, and we go back up here to iteration number 1. So I is 1. We're going to get names at 1, which would be cat.jpg. So cat.jpg comes in here and 1 comes in here. So it's going to concatenate cat.jpg onto my path. We're going to create that file, and then we're going to try and read that file in. And if cat.jpg is here, which it is, it's going to store it right here in index 1 of the pics array. So you can see how I'm using these two parameter arguments to load the image. So my load image method here is a little bit more complex than the old load image method that we made long ago when we started working with ImageIO. Okay, I'm just making it so I can make the path a little bit more flexible with a variable, and the index that I'm choosing to store it in an array comes into that parameter. Awesome. Okay, so that's our load all images, and that's our load image method. Those two things get used in conjunction. So when this gets through all of those strings, it's going to finish loading all the images into the array, and then this will terminate, and we'll end up right back here. Okay, right in setup GUI. Now I'm going to set up image panel, set up controls, and then add these things to the frame. Let's take a look at setup image panel, because that's where we do some new stuff. That's where we're going to add those images to the image icon, and add the image icon to the label, and the label to the panel, and the panel to the frame. So that is right here. So the first thing we need to do is create our JPanel for the image. So image panel gets new JPanel. We've got to make our JLabel. So image label gets new JLabel, and then I'm just going to set horizontal alignment on that image label to center. That'll make sure that the contents of that label will always be centered in the label. Okay, well, at least the first time around when I set it up. Next thing I'm going to do is set the current image. I have to do this. If I don't have an image in current image and I try and set image on the icon, I'm going to have a serious problem. We're going to have what's called a null pointer exception. It's going to kill the program. So I have to choose like a default image. In this case, I'm just using image 0, which is going to be my bunny. So every time I run this, the bunny is going to be the first thing that'll show up. See? Great. So that's going to go into current image. So pics at 0. Remember, this is the accessor right here. We just have to choose a index from that array. I chose 0. And then it's going to take that image and put it into that image variable. I have to create my image icon. So icon gets new image icon. And now set image is how we get the image out of here and onto the icon. So icon.setImage, current image is going to take the image file that's in this image variable and set it to the icon. Then we need to set the icon to the label. So image label set icon, icon. So this method here is a method from the image label class, and it's going to take an icon and it's going to add it to the label. And you have to pass an icon into it. So that's going to be the icon that I called icon. And then I have to add the image label to my image panel, which I've done. And then I'm going to add the image panel to the frame itself. Okay? So we have all of that. Now, let's move on. That's setup image panel. Setup controls is where I'm going to set up the button. It's a very simple method here. I'm just creating my new button called randomize. I'm adding the action listener, and then I'm adding it to the GUI panel. Right? And the last thing I'm going to do is add the GUI panel to border layout south and add the image panel to border layout center. Now, I accidentally already added the image panel to the frame earlier. I'm going to delete that because I don't need it. You see there are a couple of artifacts in here. I had originally when I made this program, it was built across two different classes, and I just kind of modified it because I teach this course in two different lengths, one in a 16-week course and one in a 6.5-week course. 6.5-week course is missing one of the lessons that I would normally teach before this, so this file was structured a little differently, so I edited it, and there are a couple of artifacts in there from the previous edit. So I'm going to go down and take that one thing out that really didn't change the program, but it's extraneous code. So that what was it, line 98, the add image panel, we can delete that because we're adding it right here. Image panel gets added to border layout center, and you'll see that it still works exactly the same. See? No different. All right. Our setup GUI is done. Great! We've gotten through almost all the code, except for all the stuff that happens when we press the button. Now, this class is an action listener, and you saw that the randomize button had action performed or action listener added to it. So we need to take a look at the action performed method, and that's going to depend on a method called randomize image. This is where we do our image flipping. So let's take a look at action performed, and it's really simple. It's just going to check and see if the source is our randomize button, and if it is, we'll call on randomize image. Randomize image is a method where I'm going to generate a random number in between 0 and pix.length exclusive. So if I have 10 images, it's going to generate a number between 0 and 9. And what I'm going to do is set the current image to pix at random. So it's going to use that random number to choose a new index out of the array and store that image into that image variable. Then I'm going to set the size of the image label. Why I'm going to do this is because I want to make sure that it's going to, the image label is always going to expand or contract for the size of the image. If I don't do that, then the image is going to get chopped off. It'll always be the size of the first image that's in there. And you saw that I had some of the images that were taller than the initial image. So this set size is going to allow that JLabel to expand and contract. Then I'm going to set the current image to the icon and then repaint. And that's how the image flipping takes place. All right? Well, there you have it. This was a relatively complex program. Some of the things that you want to make sure you know how to do for your translator program is this section here in where you're flipping the images, where you get a new image stored in the image, you set that image to the icon, and then you repaint. The other thing you need to know how to do is load a bunch of images, and you could do it in 2 steps like this by calling on a load image method, or you could just do all of this stuff right here in the for loop. Either way you do it is totally fine. It doesn't matter, just as long as you know how this whole portion works. Okay? All right. Thanks for tuning in. I've probably got about 1 or 2 more videos, maybe 3, depending on how many videos it takes me to get through the next lecture files. Thanks for watching.